Welcome to the deep dive. Look, we all know there's just an overwhelming amount of information out there, especially when it comes to AI. It's really easy to feel like you're drowning in data, but, starving for actual wisdom.
Yeah, absolutely. Headlines everywhere, some exciting, some frankly terrifying.
Exactly. And cutting through that noise to figure out what really matters, that's tough. So today, that's what we're doing. We're going to extract the crucial insights, maybe some surprising facts, from the latest research to give you a clearer picture.
That's the plan. Our mission today really is to take a good hard look at AI's existential risks. Compare them properly to other big threats we face.
Right.
But importantly, it's not just about the doom and gloom. We're then going to unpack the really surprising, pretty massive economic value that actually comes from making AI safe and aligned.
Ah, interesting. Okay.
And then the really cool part, we'll unveil a pretty revolutionary concept for building AI you can actually trust, something that could genuinely change how we interact with these systems and maybe unlock trillions in new value.
Trillions.
Wow.
Yeah.
And this isn't just like abstract theory. It's about giving you a practical grasp of what's potentially coming down the line and what it means for your world.
Okay, let's dive in then. So when people think about AI and, the potential downsides, the catastrophe scenarios, one comparison always seems to pop up: AI versus nuclear weapons.
hmm It's the go-to.
It really
Oh,
is.
yes.
And it makes sense, right? Both have this huge potential for good, but also this unimaginable power for destruction. It feels like a really natural analogy, but
Yeah.
is it actually accurate?
It does feel intuitive, doesn't it? And the research actually shows why it's so tempting. I mean, you're talking about technologies that can just fundamentally reshape the global economy, like overnight, but also, yeah, threaten our very existence.
Right.
But that analogy, as natural as it feels, it actually, well, it breaks down pretty significantly in three really critical ways.
Okay, breaks down. That's a strong statement. What are these subtle but critical differences that make AI risk so uniquely complicated?
Well, first off, there's AI's scope. It's just vast.
Right.
Nuclear weapons, they're designed for focused, specific destruction, limited purpose.
Right, point A to point B.
Exactly. But AI, its applications are everywhere. Economics, war, biotech, how governments run our daily lives. It's
Mhm.
becoming this foundational layer for, well, almost everything. And that makes its risks incredibly diffuse, pervasive.
Okay, scope is one. What else?
Second is what the researchers call non-excludable inputs. Think of non-excludable as something so widely available you can't really fence it off easily.
Like air.
Sort of, yeah.
Yeah.
For nukes, you need restricted stuff, right? Uranium, plutonium, hard to get, hard to make.
Hmm.
AI runs on data and compute. And those inputs, they're ubiquitous. They're everywhere, widely accessible, which makes controlling it, regulating it, way more complex.
Got it. Ubiquitous inputs. And the third difference.
The third is its graduated strategic impact. Nuclear war is,
Yeah.
well, it's pretty binary, right? An immediate catastrophe.
Yeah.
It's either happening or it's not.
Yeah, it's kind of an on-off switch.
Exactly. AI's risks, though, they scale up incrementally. You start with things like misinformation, maybe deepfakes, then move to cyber attacks, autonomous weapons,
Yeah.
all the way up to potential superintelligence issues.
Yeah.
It's more of a creeping systemic impact, not one sudden bang.
Okay, so those are some really fundamental distinctions. So let's try this. If we make a list of human extinction risks,
Mm.
specifically weighted towards things that could plausibly happen within, say, the next few decades,
Near-term stuff.
near term, yeah. And this is the key bit risks that are entirely independent of AI. Where does AI actually rank compared to those? What are the top contenders that genuinely outrank AI on that kind of, short timeline, independent threat graph?
Right. So when you crunch the numbers and look at the analysis, what the research really points to, pretty unequivocally, are two clear contenders that sit above AI on that specific kind of graph. And, the biggest takeaway from actually trying to rank these awful threats, it forces you to confront a kind of surprising truth. Not all fears are created equal. Where we put our focus now, it dramatically changes our odds. It forces ruthless prioritization.
So what are the top two?
First, nuclear war. It's short-term likelihood, moderate to high, unfortunately. We're talking about, what, roughly 12,000 warheads globally right now, give or take?
Still feels like way too many.
It is, and you've got ongoing geopolitical tensions. U.S., China, Russia, NATO, India, Pakistan, Miscalculations could escalate fast, a full-scale exchange. We're looking at nuclear winter, billions dead from blast, radiation, famine. It's a proven, deployed technology with immediate catastrophic potential.
Okay, so nuclear war is clearly number one on that specific list. What's the other big contender independent of AI, short term?
Natural pandemics? Their short-term likelihood is also, well, uncomfortably high. Natural evolution.
Yeah.
Things like avian flu mutations jumping to humans, or look back at historical pandemics like the 1918 flu.
Yeah, Spanish flu is devastating.
Exactly. If a really lethal and highly transmittable pathogen emerges, and maybe our vaccine tech can't keep up, it could genuinely cause catastrophic, even extinction-level impact.
Hmm.
And this relies on natural processes, right? Not some future tech breakthrough like AI.
Okay. And what about other things people worry about, like climate change, asteroids?
Right, so those are obviously serious, but on this specific graph, short-term independent extinction level, they tend to fall below AI. Climate change's extinction timeline is generally seen as longer, playing out over more decades or centuries.
Mm.
Asteroid impacts, supervolcanoes, gamma ray bursts. The chances of an extinction-level event from those in the next few decades are just extremely low.
Yeah.
So, important, yes, but not top of this particular list.
Okay, so we've identified the big non-AI independent threats, nukes, and natural pandemics. But what does this ranking exercise actually mean for you, the listener? Why bother doing this? What's the practical use?
Oh, it's incredibly useful, actually, for a few key reasons. First, and this is critical, it helps prioritize resources. Knowing the most imminent threats lets us channel scientific effort, political capital, economic resources where they're needed most right now.
Like focusing on nuclear treaties or pandemic surveillance?
Exactly. Immediate, actionable stuff like non-proliferation efforts, biosecurity measures. Second, it informs policy and public awareness. Highlighting these, let's say, more tangible risks can galvanize action from governments and the public. Sometimes AI's existential risk, while huge, can feel a bit abstract, maybe diluting focus if not framed carefully.
It's easier to rally people around a visible threat.
Yeah. And finally, this exercise actually clarifies AI's unique nature. It underscores that AI isn't like a single bomb. It's this diffuse systemic force. And understanding that helps us tailor the right risk mitigation strategies for AI, like tackling its role in cyber attacks or misinformation, which is totally different from preparing for a hurricane or even a nuke.
So it's not just about what the threat is, but how to deal with it effectively. That makes sense. But I think you also hinted that this ranking exercise, well, it might not always be useful. What are the downsides or the pitfalls here?
Yeah, there are definitely limitations. The biggest one is probably the oversimplification of risks.
How so?
Well, this kind of ranking often ignores how AI could actually worsen other threats.
Mm-hmm.
AI might make nuclear war more likely through autonomous weapon systems, or maybe accelerate pandemics by helping design novel pathogens.
The interconnectedness.
Exactly. Treating them as totally separate things distorts reality. Another issue is just the timelines are really speculative. All these short-term weightings, they rely on subjective guesses, estimations. AI development is notoriously hard to predict. Geopolitics are volatile. So precise rankings based on fuzzy probabilities, they get unreliable fast. And finally, it can sometimes create a false sense of control. If we focus too much on the risks ranked above AI on this specific chart, we might accidentally downplay AI's really unique challenges. Remember those non-excludable inputs, the gradual impact. That makes AI fundamentally harder to contain and regulate than discrete threats like nuclear materials.
So the deeper we go, the more tangled it seems. Can we try and pull out a more refined conclusion then? What's the argument for saying that maybe no non-AI independent near-term extinction level risks truly and clearly outrank AI once you factor in those unique characteristics you mentioned?
Yeah, I think that's where the analysis really leads. The argument is pretty compelling. When you fully account for AI's unique risk profile, it kind of jumps into its own category.
Wow.
Well, that far-reaching scope means it integrates into everything, making it a potential amplifier of other risks, possibly making them much worse. Then there's the rapid development timeline. Driven by fairly predictable tech trends, like compute power scaling up, AI could hit existential risk levels within, say, 20 to 50 years.
Which is faster than some other major threats, like the worst of climate change.
Potentially, yes. And because its inputs are non-excludable data, compute everywhere, it's just inherently harder to regulate and contain. And unlike that single nuclear launch, AI's risks scale up incrementally. They can sort of creep into the existential territory without one single obvious trigger event. This whole combination makes it a uniquely potent near-term concern that's just difficult to compare apples to apples with other, more discrete threats.
Okay, that's a strong case for AI's unique threat level. But let's, play devil's advocate for our listeners. What's the strongest argument against AI dominating these near-term risk discussions? What might we be overlooking if we focus too heavily on AI right now?
That's fair. The strongest counterpoints really circle back to immediacy and, well, established threats. Nuclear war's immediacy is powerful. Those arsenals exist right now, they're deployed. It's a clear and present danger.
No future tech needed.
Exactly. Same with a natural pandemic. A nasty pathogen could emerge tomorrow through sheer biological chance, no human innovation required. Yeah. And importantly, that interdependence we talked about, it cuts both ways. Meaning, while AI could amplify other risks, a massive catastrophe like a nuclear war or a devastating pandemic could also severely disrupt AI development itself. It could effectively slam the brakes on AI progress.
Yeah.
So it's not just a one-way street where AI makes everything worse. It's a complex, interacting web.
Okay, this whole discussion leads to a really tangible, almost chilling question. Given all these complex, scary risks, how would you actually budget for humanity's survival? Let's say we had a hypothetical global fund, maybe $100 billion a year, just for mitigating existential risks. Where should that money go?
Right. This is where the rubber meets the road, turning analysis into practical allocation based on that rigorous assessment of risk profiles, timelines, independence, amplification potential. Here's a potential breakdown for that hypothetical $100 billion annual budget.
Okay, let's hear it.
For AI risk mitigation, you'd probably dedicate the largest chunk, $40 billion, so 40%.
Why the biggest slice for AI?
Because of its systemic scope, those non-excludable inputs, the graduated impact. It makes it this pervasive, growing threat that needs both long-term resilience building and action on near-term misuse right now.
And how would that $40 billion break down?
You'd probably put, say, $15 billion into core AI safety research, the fundamental alignment problem. Maybe $10 billion towards global AI governance, trying to build something like the IIEA for nuclear oversight, but for AI. And another $10 billion focused squarely on near-term misuse prevention, tackling things like AI-driven cyber attacks, deepfakes, autonomous weapons control, the stuff that's already starting to bite.
Okay, 40% for AI. What about those more immediate, tangible threats, nukes and pandemics?
Right. For nuclear war prevention, you'd allocate the next biggest slice, $30 billion, or 30%. It's arguably the most immediate extinction risk, given existing arsenals and geopolitical flashpoints.
And where would that money go? Arms control?
Primarily, yeah. Maybe $12 billion for arms control and diplomacy supporting treaties, de-escalation talks, another $10 billion for missile defense and detection, but with a heavy emphasis on keeping humans in the loop, preventing accidental escalation, and perhaps $8 billion for geopolitical stabilization efforts trying to address the root causes of conflict.
Okay. And pandemics?
For natural pandemic preparedness, $25 billion, so 25%. It's still an independent, highly plausible risk with that extinction potential if a really bad pathogen hits.
How would you spend that? Vaccines? Surveillance?
Both. You'd need maybe $10 billion for pathogen surveillance, beefing up global networks like the WHO and CDC have, another $10 billion for vaccine and countermeasure R&D, specifically focusing on rapid response platforms that can adapt quickly, and maybe $5 billion for strengthening basic public health infrastructure globally, because weak systems anywhere are a threat everywhere.
Right. That leaves just a small slice left.
Yeah, the remaining $5 billion, just 5%, would go to other risks, things like asteroids and supervolcanoes. Their low near-term likelihood means minimal funding, mainly for monitoring, is probably sufficient for now. So maybe split between enhanced asteroid detection programs and geological monitoring.
So boiling it down, the principles seem to be allocate money roughly proportional to the risk, stay flexible as things change, be super aware of how these risks connect, and crucially, coordinate globally.
That's it, exactly. It's about being pragmatic with limited resources facing potentially infinite, or at least very large threats.
Okay, let's shift gears now. We've talked a lot about danger, about mitigation, but you mentioned something earlier that sounded, well, almost counterintuitive. Unlocking massive economic value from making AI safe.
Yes. This is the staggering insight that often gets lost. Making AI safe isn't just a cost, like buying insurance. It's actually a multi-trillion-dollar economic engine. It's like discovering a hidden gold mine that you can only access once you build trust.
So what are these second-order byproduct economic values you get from successfully aligning AI? Where does this massive value actually come from?
It honestly might sound too good to be true, but the research figures are just huge. Some estimates suggest AI alignment efforts could add somewhere between, say, $2.45 trillion and maybe even $4.8 trillion annually to the global economy by 2030.
Wait, up to $4.8 trillion a year? That's almost hard to wrap your head around. Break that down for us. Where does that number come from?
Okay, so one huge piece is enhanced AI reliability and adoption.
Okay.
Simple idea. When AI systems are consistently trustworthy, when they actually do what we intend them to do, businesses and consumers are just far more willing to use them and use them for more critical tasks.
Makes sense. Trust drives adoption.
Exactly. McKinsey estimated AI could add maybe $13 trillion to global GDP by 2030. Alignment making it reliable could boost that adoption rate, potentially increasing that value by an extra 10–20%. Do the math, that's $1.3 to $2.6 trillion in additional value right there, just from increased trust and usage.
Wow. Okay, that's a big chunk already. What else?
Another massive factor is reduced economic losses from AI failures. Misaligned AI that goes wrong. It causes huge disruptions. Did you know some studies suggest over 80% of AI projects actually fail? That's billions wasted.
80%. That's shocking.
It is. And think about high-profile screw-ups. Uber's self-driving car incident cost millions in settlements and delays. Amazon had that biased recruiting tool that hurt their reputation and likely cost them talent. Alignment directly prevents these kinds of failures, potentially saving anywhere from $100 billion to maybe $500 billion in annual losses globally.
So we're talking huge direct savings and massive growth enablement. What else adds to this multi-trillion-dollar figure?
Well, there's improved governance and standards. As we figure out alignment, we naturally develop better global standards and regulatory frameworks. This prevents losses from sort of rogue or poorly deployed AI, like estimates suggest maybe $500 billion a year in cybersecurity damages by 2030. Could be saved with better governance and AI that doesn't accidentally create new holes. Then you get spillover innovations. The research needed for alignment, things like interpretability, robustness, understanding complex systems, it generates new tools and techniques. These spill over into other fields, like boosting cybersecurity defenses, improving data science, even helping with new scientific discoveries. That could easily generate hundreds of billions in new tech and services.
Right. The research itself creates value.
Exactly. And finally, don't underestimate the social and ethical benefits. AI that respects human values reduces risks of bias, discrimination, or inequality. These things don't just cause social harm, they destabilize economies. Avoiding those pitfalls could save another, say, $500 billion globally just from preventing inequality costs in AI-driven sectors. It's a truly holistic economic uplift.
Okay, so if AI alignment is this potential economic powerhouse, how do we make that argument stick? How do we quantify it in a way that, say, a CFO or an investor really gets? I heard you mention this idea of pricing AI competence risks like financial options. How does that analogy work?
It's a really powerful analogy, especially for people used to financial thinking. Basically, you treat investments in AI alignment, the money spent on safety research, governance, etc., as the premium you pay on a put option.
Okay, remind me quickly what a put option is.
It's essentially financial insurance. You pay a small fee, the premium, to protect yourself against a big potential loss, the strike price, if something bad happens like a stock crashing.
Got it. So alignment cost is the premium.
Right. That relatively small annual cost, maybe $5 to $20 billion globally on alignment R&D and implementation, is your premium. And what you're hedging against, the strike price, is that massive potential economic loss from AI failure we just talked about, those $100 billion to $500 billion in annual loss.
Okay.
So you pay a little to potentially save a lot.
Precisely. It frames alignment not as a cost center, but as a high-return investment. Spending $520 billion to prevent $500 billion in losses. That's a massive net economic benefit. It makes the business case for safety crystal clear.
And how does this connect back to something more fundamental, like just making AI better at understanding and doing what we ask it to do? How does improved goal definition translate to dollars and cents?
Nope, directly and profoundly. When an AI is truly aligned, it accurately gets what you want it to do and does it effectively. This immediately boosts productivity. Studies show aligned AI can increase worker performance anywhere from 10% up to even 56% in tasks like coding, writing, customer service.
56%, that's huge.
It's huge. And higher productivity also means drastically reduced rework costs.
Yeah.
Billions are wasted annually fixing mistakes made by misaligned AI. Getting it right the first time saves that money. And maybe most importantly, it unlocks entirely new markets.
How so?
By enabling AI in sensitive, high-stakes areas where trust and accuracy are non-negotiable. Think medical diagnostics, autonomous financial advising, critical infrastructure control. You can only deploy AI there if you are certain it understands and reliably pursues the right goals. Alignment makes that possible.
So, beyond the direct financial stuff, what other, maybe less obvious, valuable byproducts come from really prioritizing AI risk reduction?
Well, you see significant workforce upskilling as demand grows for people who understand AI ethics, safety, governance. You get increased public trust in technology generally, which drives adoption across the board, not just for AI. You potentially enhance geopolitical stability by reducing the incentives for a dangerous, unregulated AI arms race.
Hmm.
And even environmental gains, as properly aligned AI helps optimize energy grids, logistics, material science, resource allocation across industries.
Hmm.
It's incredibly broad. And this all loops back to why that AI nuclear comparison was flawed but also revealing.
Oh.
Because AI's far-reaching scope and those non-excludable inputs mean that the benefits of alignment are just as diffuse and pervasive as the risks. Success economically transforms almost every sector imaginable, which is why significant investment makes so much sense globally.
Okay, let's tackle what many see as AI's biggest hurdle, the black box problem. We've talked about the huge risks, the staggering potential, but bridging that gap seems blocked by this fundamental issue, right? That we often don't really know why complex AI makes the decisions it does.
Exactly. It's often described as AI's Achilles heel. Unless we solve it, that potential stays locked up and the risks just get amplified. It's like that quote, trying to fix a car engine with the hood welded shut.
Yeah, perfect analogy. And this isn't just theoretical, right? This opacity leads to real problems, what you call value drift.
Precisely. Value drift is when an AI's actual behavior or goals subtly, or sometimes not so subtly, diverge from what its creators intended.
Yeah.
And it has very real, costly consequences happening now.
Like what? Give us some concrete examples.
Okay, think about bias hiring algorithms. They weren't intended to discriminate, but trained on biased historical data, they end up perpetuating those biases. That's value drift. Or consider AI labs sometimes refusing to disclose their training data, as ethicists like Timnit Gebru have pointed out. That opacity breeds mistrust and makes accountability impossible. Another example, financial models built with AI that hallucinate basically make stuff up, leading to terrible investment decisions. Or even just customer service chatbots providing nonsense answers, eroding trust and damaging a company's brand.
So it's not just an ethical concern for the future.
Not at all. It's a B2B imperative today. Businesses need to avoid the financial, reputational, and legal risks that come from deploying opaque, potentially unreliable AI.
This brings us squarely to the fractal identity map, or FEM. It's being presented as a potential breakthrough. The claim is it's an interpretable by design architecture where the structure itself provides the explanation.
That's the core idea. It's not about bolting on an explanation layer afterwards. It's about building the AI so its very organization makes its reasoning transparent.
Okay, before we get into the mechanics, can you give us a simple analogy for how FEM achieves that? How is it different from, say, current neural networks?
Sure. Think of most current complex AI, like a large neural network, as a tangled ball of yarn. Information flows through it, decisions come out, but tracing the exact path and logic, it's incredibly difficult, sometimes impossible.
Right, the black box.
FEM, on the other hand, is conceived more like a perfectly organized multidimensional library or a detailed map. Every single piece of information, every concept, every connection the AI uses, it has its own precise, self-describing address within this structure.
Like a very sophisticated filing system.
Exactly. But a filing system where the location and address of a file tells you almost everything you need to know about what's in it, where it came from, and how it connects to everything else. The structure is the explanation. Transparency is baked in from the start.
Okay, that's a really helpful image. So how does FEM actually do that? What are the core mechanics that create this structural transparency?
It relies on several key mechanics working together. First, these self-legending semantic addresses. Imagine an address isn't just node 133, but something meaningful like science.biology.genetics.CRISPR. That address itself tells you the node's identity and its context within the broader knowledge structure. It's like combining a zip code with the Dewey Decimal Code for every single concept.
So the address itself carries meaning. Got it.
Second, it uses weight-ordered hierarchies. This means the most important, foundational information is structurally prioritized. It's like how the main trunk and branches of a tree are thicker and come first before the smaller twig's significance is built into the structure.
Okay, makes sense.
Third, it's designed to be multidimensional and self-similar, which is where the fractal part comes in. The organizational pattern, how information is structured and related, is consistent, whether you're looking at the highest level categories or the finest grained details. That pattern repeats at every scale.
Like zooming in on a fractal image.
Exactly like that.
Yeah.
And finally, and this is really crucial for trust, it has threshold-based drift resistance.
What does that mean? How does it prevent that value drift we talked about?
Unlike current AI, where concepts represented by embeddings can subtly shift meaning over time in ways that are hard to track. In FIM, reclassifying information or changing a concept's relationship requires crossing a defined significance threshold. It becomes a distinct, traceable event in the structure. This constrains the degrees of freedom concepts can't just vaguely drift. It makes causality explicit and auditable. This is fundamentally different from approaches struggling with the combinatorial explosion of context in complex data. FIM aims to tame that explosion through its inherent structure.
Okay, that's quite a technical explanation, but the core idea of a self-describing, organized, drift-resistant knowledge structure is really compelling. Now, to grasp the potential impact, you mentioned a really powerful historical analogy, the Black-Scholes model in finance. Can you unpack that parallel for us?
Yeah, it's a fantastic parallel to understand the potential shift. So before Black-Scholes came along in the early 70s, pricing financial options, it was really opaque. It was based on gut feelings, intuition, experience. Risk was just a feeling.
Hard to build a market on feelings.
Exactly. It blocked widespread investment and hedging because nobody could agree on a fair price or reliably quantify the risk. Black-Scholes' huge breakthrough wasn't just a formula for pricing an option. It was creating a computable language for risk itself, primarily by quantifying volatility, something previously intangible.
Ah, it gave a number to the uncertainty.
Precisely. And that clarity, that shared language for risk, unlocked the modern multi-trillion-dollar derivatives market. It built a whole new essential layer of the financial system.
Okay, so how does FIM parallel that?
Well, the big challenge with AI today isn't just its power, it's the fundamental lack of trust stemming from its opacity, this competence risk, the deep uncertainty about what an AI actually knows, what it can reliably do, where its boundaries are. That's the new volatility.
Right, the big unknown.
FIM's potential, its Black-Scholes parallel, is to create a common, standardized, computable language for verifiable competence in AI. If it works, it could transform AI from being this high potential but also high risk sort of illiquid operational tool into a transparent, auditable, and ultimately investable asset class.
An investable asset class.
Yeah,
That's a huge
definitely.
one. So this new language of verifiable competence, how does that actually unblock investment and, as you said, revolutionize insurance for AI? Give us some concrete examples.
Okay, think about it. For investment, imagine you could issue AI competence bonds or maybe compliance-linked notes. These would be financial instruments where the payout is directly tied to an AI maintaining a specific verifiable level of performance, say 99.9% accuracy in medical diagnosis, as measured and audited through its FIM structure.
So investors could bet on AI reliability.
Exactly. It creates liquid, tradable securities based on AI performance and trustworthiness. This could unlock massive pools of global capital that are currently sitting on the sidelines because AI risk is too opaque. You could even see a vibrant secondary market emerge for buying, selling, or licensing AI models themselves because their capabilities and limitations would finally be transparent and auditable via FIMM.
Okay, that's the investment side. What about insurance?
This is where it gets really interesting. FIMM could enable parametric insurance for AI failures.
Parametric. What's that?
Unlike traditional insurance, where you have to prove damage after something goes wrong, parametric policies pay out automatically and immediately based on a pre-agreed trigger or parameter being breached.
Ah, like hurricane insurance that pays out if wind speed hits Category 3, regardless of actual house damage.
Exactly that principle. With FAM, the insurance policy could be linked to the AI operating within predefined competence boundaries on its map. If the AI's state or decision path goes outside those verified boundaries, boom, the policy pays out automatically. No lengthy claims process arguing about fault.
That sounds much cleaner.
Much cleaner and much more attractive to insurers and reinsurers. It makes AI risk quantifiable and insurable in a way it just isn't today. You could see the rise of AI insurance-linked securities, ILS, packaging and trading AI operational risk, much like catastrophe bonds do for natural disasters.
And you mentioned a trust option multiple. What's that?
Yeah, that's the idea that in some situations, the FEMSISTER itself, the thing providing the guarantee of verifiable competence, can actually be more valuable economically than the direct output of the AI it's monitoring,
How can the guarantee be worth more?
because of the immense downside risk it mitigates. Imagine a complex financial AI. Its direct profit contribution might be, say, $10 million. But if deploying it without FEM carries a risk of a $100 million regulatory fine or a catastrophic trading error, then the FEM system providing the auditable guarantee, maybe costing $1 million, is incredibly valuable. That $1 million investment is leveraged against preventing a $100 million loss. That's the trust option multiple in action.
Wow. Okay, that reframes the value proposition completely. This idea of mapping complex risks brings us nicely to another concept. Leon Shapira's doom train analogy for AI risk. Can you explain that?
Yeah, it's a really useful mental model for thinking about AI existential risk. Shatira's point is that the path to AI catastrophe isn't necessarily a single event, but more like a train journey where disaster only happens if multiple potential safety mechanisms or brakes fail in sequence.
What kind of breaks?
Things like maybe AI development turns out to be slower than predicted, a slow takeoff, or maybe aligning AI with human values turns out to be technically easier than feared, or perhaps effective global governance emerges to manage the risks, or maybe economic factors limit how powerful AI gets. Each of these is a potential off-ramp or break on the doom train. Catastrophe only happens if you believe every single one of these breaks has a non-zero chance of failing.
Okay, so it requires multiple failures. How does FIM relate to mapping this kind of complex, multi-stage argument?
Well, FEM's structured approach is actually well suited to mapping out these kinds of probabilistic interdependent arguments. You can represent each break or off-ramp as a node or a condition in the map.
Can you walk us through how you might calculate the probability using that analogy?
Sure, let's assign a hypothetical dismissal probability to each break that's the chance the argument against doom fails, or the break doesn't hold. Say 0.85 chance that scaling isn't slow, 0.65 chance competitive dynamics are fierce, 0.95 chance alignment is hard, 0.45 chance human coordination fails, 0.70 chance economics don't stop it, and 0.50 chance unforeseen factors bite us.
Okay, a bunch of probabilities.
Right. Now, if you make the simplifying assumption that these are all independent events, you can calculate the overall P, the probability of all breaks failing by just multiplying these dismissal probabilities together.
And what does that give you?
In this hypothetical example, 0.85 by 0.65 by 0.95 by 0.45 by 0.70 by 0.50,
Yeah.
it comes out to roughly 8.3%. So if they were independent, the chance of catastrophe looks relatively low.
I sense a but coming. Are they really independent?
Almost certainly not. And that's the crucial insight that structured mapping like FEM forces you to confront. Real-world factors are deeply interconnected. For example, intense geopolitical competition might accelerate AI scaling and simultaneously undermine global governance efforts. Those two breaks aren't independent. One failing makes the other more likely to fail.
Right. Dependencies matter a lot.
Hugely. When you model these dependencies explicitly within the map, maybe saying strong competition increases the chance of coordination failure, the overall probability of doom goes up significantly. In a scenario with moderate dependencies, that 8.3% might jump to 12%. With high dependencies, maybe it climbs to 18%. Our consolidated estimate trying to balance these might land around 15%.
So the exact number isn't the point.
Exactly. The value isn't the specific percentage, which is full of assumptions anyway. The value is how the structured mapping forces you to explicitly model the dependencies, the uncertainties, the chain of logic. It transforms this really abstract, often emotional debate into a computable, auditable map of the interconnected risks.
And this detailed way of analyzing a huge abstract risk, like AI doom, it's actually a direct analogy for the kinds of complex, high-stakes risks that businesses or even individuals face all the time, isn't it?
Absolutely. Just replace P-doom with your probability of a major product launch failing, or probability of missing quarterly targets, or probability of regulatory noncompliance. BIAM, or even just the structured thinking it encourages, acts like a living, computable map for your strategic landscape. It forces you to lay out all your assumptions, the weight you give a marketing campaign, the chance a competitor makes a certain move, the likelihood a key supplier fails. It forces you to think about how those factors depend on each other. It aims to transform ambiguity and gut feelings into auditable, actionable clarity for your most critical challenges. It's about bringing that same structured rigor to your own decisions.
Wow. What an incredible journey we've taken today on this deep dive. We started by looking at the cold, hard facts of human extinction risks, nuclear war, pandemics, and really digging into how AI compares with its unique, pervasive threat profile.
Mm-hmm. A complex picture.
Then we shifted to something really surprising: the massive economic potential that could be unlocked simply by making AI safe and aligned, turning safety from a cost into potentially a multi-trillion-dollar opportunity.
Yeah, that economic upside is often overlooked, but it's potentially enormous.
And finally, we explored a potential path forward with the fractal identity map, this idea of an interpretable by design architecture that promises to move AI out of the opaque black box and turn it into something transparent, auditable, maybe even truly investable.
Indeed. AI is rapidly becoming the foundational layer of our society. And this generation, our generation, really faces its equivalent of nuclear stewardship. It demands more than just clever algorithms. It demands a whole new philosophy of information architecture, one built on clarity, transparency, and responsibility.
A new philosophy.
Yeah. FAMA represents one attempt at a proactive design for alignment, trying to build that structural integrity in from the ground up before the uncontrolled scaling of opaque AI creates problems we can't fix. It's fundamentally about building a future where we can actually understand and therefore trust our most powerful tools.
So here's a final thought for you, our listener, building on everything we've discussed. If the future doesn't have to be a black box, and if concepts like FEM suggest we can bring verifiable, maybe even insurable clarity to something as complex as AI, what kind of explainable structure could you build for your own knowledge, your own projects, your own endeavors? It's a question worth pondering, because clarity, it turns out, isn't just about understanding, it's about empowerment.